you're going to be uncomfortable, but it's ultimately how you learn and how you achieve that. So I guess to answer your question, my habit that I've tried to form is really just poise and understanding that there's going to be uncomfortable moments with each project, but how we respond and how we can, I would say, ask the right questions and take that in stride is how we can be better for the next time.
Welcome to the Placemaking Podcast. The show geared at helping real estate developers learn and understand important aspects of the development process. Each week, we'll discuss major facets of the real estate development process with industry professionals. Now, here's your host, Matthew Lowe's.
Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining the show. I'm extremely excited about our guest today. Cameron is a great friend of mine and a project manager at Cornerstone Projects Group here in Fort Worth, Texas. Cameron has been successfully managing projects with Cornerstone for almost 3 years now. His architectural background gives him a unique perspective on opportunities that I think you'll find interesting. The firm he works with, Cornerstone Projects Group, is an award-winning development, architecture, and construction services firm offering solutions for office, retail, and multifamily projects here in North Central Texas. So in this episode, we're going to discuss ways to mitigate risk to your development schedule and budget, selecting a project team, and ways to track the performance of your project throughout the development process. So as always, if you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and share with your friends. There'll be more exciting conversations on this show to come. So without further ado, let's start the show. Hey, welcome to the show, Cameron.
Hey, Matt, glad to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Of course, wanted the best of the best to show up on the first few episodes.
Yeah, I'm excited.
From my previous introduction, Cameron is a project manager with Cornerstone Projects Group, full service development, architecture, and construction services firm here in Fort Worth. Give us a little intro into yourself and a little bit about Cornerstone.
Yeah, so you kind of covered Cornerstone. We're a full service real estate development, architecture, and construction are our three main, kind of profit centers. And how I kind of fit into here at Cornerstone is I actually was trained as an architect, and following A&M, worked in Houston at a large architecture firm. Kind of fell in love with the big picture of real estate and the opportunity that development offers, and was able to kind of connect with Cornerstone up here with Nolan, and able to make the transition over. And since then, I've been doing some architecture and construction and development. We kind of try to do it all, and it's been really fun getting the broader picture and experience that development has.
Real estate. Is this what you wanted to be when you grew up, or was it something you just kind of fell into?
I think I had a romantic idea of architecture being kind of the sole driving occupation or profession in the real world, the decision maker, the kind of driving factor. And while sometimes that is the case, architects are extremely vital to the built environment and process. I think they're a component and they're a great piece of the pie, but just having the opportunity to really see the full breadth of development from beginning process to final conception and the actual built structure, that's what really draws me to development. And I get to work a lot with architects. I get to work with architects here at Cornerstone, contractors, construction, and then see everything come together. And from brokerage, banking, like I said, architects and construction, just the whole pie. I guess that's what is so engaging and exciting about being on the development end.
Being able to see all aspects is pretty special there. All aspects is pretty special there at Cornerstone.
Yeah, it's like I said, I was trained as an architect and obviously know the importance, and they're such a vital tool and resource. Both senior directors here at Cornerstone have architecture backgrounds as well as myself, so we do not take that lightly. Design is such a integral part of the development process, from cost analysis and from overall vision casting. You really have to spend time and dollars in the design process, and architects definitely drive that.
Right. And so you made the transition to a project manager that handles pretty much every aspect of the development project. Can you tell me a little bit about how you guys select the team? I mean, right now you have a majority of the team already on staff, but for those outside of this,
first of all, capture the vision that we're striving for, and who can be a part of that vision and who shares that vision. None of our work is done in isolation. There wouldn't be very good development, and it wouldn't be feasible, and wouldn't get very far. So I think that's one of our first things, is figuring out our vision, and then the people that align.
Different mindsets, different ways of thinking that ultimately make project management probably pretty difficult. You have architects that are more of the visionary types, engineers like myself, and the structural engineers are concrete in their thinking, and
no pun intended.
Are concrete in their thinking, and
no pun intended.
Yeah, to put it lightly. And then you have, interior designers, which are also more visionary, more, I guess, end user driven.
Right.
How do you communicate with all those different personality types?
Yeah, I think talking about each within the timeline of development, I think there's different phases, and you can talk about the phases of financially or within design or within construction, but maybe from just a design standpoint, there's a kind of brainstorming or very fluid conversation that I think happens at the beginning, that where communication is not really tailored to be overly structured, but everything's on the table. You're meeting and you're expressing the intentions of, whether it be the owner or you as a developer, is everyone to share that vision, and to what designs are kind of thrown out there. I think at the beginning can be really an open forum, and from there, I think you start to tailor your communication and your platform to organize and communicate effectively. One of the things, simply, especially with owners or within our team from a design standpoint, and that can be engineering, interior design, structure, whatever it is. We use Basecamp, which is pretty fluid, to organize all of our thoughts and conversations at the front end, and that really keeps everyone informed about what we're choosing and how that's informing the price point and how we're communicating everything, so it's on an open forum. And then once you kind of move past that, you start to structure your conversation and organization to be much more streamlined and a little more direct, just so that we don't have a free during the either you've ended design and now we're moving into more of a structured, we're getting into construction, we're moving into the final stages of a development, and we get a lot more streamlined in our communication to achieve our final result in a time efficient manner, because as everyone knows, in development world, our time is critical and an important impact to the financial viability of the project.
You mentioned streamline, important.
Right.
So how do you track the performance of the project? How do you track efficiencies and budgets throughout the project?
Yeah, I kind of mentioned, some of the practical tools that we use here at Cornerstone, but I mean, one of the biggest things a project goes is, one, always tying, like I've talked about with the vision, always tying back to the vision, but then that vision ultimately is supported or succeeds or fails based on the financial viability. And so our first phase of any project starts with like everyone talks about that back of napkin or cost analysis of a project. And a lot of times that we won't even talk about that because 9 out of 10 of those cost feasibilities fail because it doesn't make sense or isn't the best case forward or best path forward but if it does, we get to the second and third kind of feasibility stages. And to answer your question, I just think we always tie back into what informs that pro forma and what budgets tie back to, whether it be design, from architecture, engineering, and structural to eventually contract engineering and structural to eventually contractor input, subcontractor input. And we're tying all that back to that back of napkin approach that eventually turns into the Excel pro forma that we then use as really the Bible to like move forward in a project. And at each juncture, analyzing land costs, site design, as I mentioned, and hard costs, how that informs that pro forma. One of the practical examples that we use is in construction, a software called Procore, which really helps us streamline that. It's a great communication tool, not only in budgeting and communicating through RFIs and through submittals. It kind of keeps everything in one spot instead of searching for emails. And typically we move away from Basecamp at the design phase to really integrate everything to that one platform in Procore, which some subs like, some subs don't, but we make them use it to help ourselves out and to kind of have everything in one spot.
Right. And I think that's unique to Cornerstone, is having those three disciplines per se, the architecture, the construction management, the development, all those arms under one roof, design to the pro forma, going back to development.
Right.
And seeing how those three relate throughout the process, which that's got to be unique to Cornerstone.
Yeah, it really makes our team critical in the age. It's the most important thing on a team, and just communication and
Cornerstone.
Yeah, it really makes our team critical in the age. It's the most important thing on a team, and just communication and understanding that just because we have all those in-house doesn't make it less difficult to communicate. We still have to have internal communication that is amazing because we do have that in-house. And so we take that especially seriously because, as everyone knows who runs a construction project or is a part of a development team, there's just so many moving parts, and we have to make sure that we are just in constant communication. So that's something that we're daily striving to improve upon and offer as a just great service here at Cornerstone.
Those are perfect points. Communication is important no matter what piece of the puzzle you are. It's invaluable. A lack of communication is an expensive problem to have.
Yeah, and challenging is you're touching every kind of role in the development process, from geotechnical, legal, marketing, and all those people have to share your vision, have to understand processes, and have to understand they're part of the process. That's what's critical. Is, as a developer, we understand to be able to approach each person in the development process with poise and understanding and dignity based on our knowledge of their role. And so they have to understand their part in the process, and we have to communicate that effectively to move everything along. Nothing's worse than calling the civil engineer. Nothing's worse than calling the civil engineer or the marketing group and not being on the same page, after a few weeks of maybe poor correspondence or whatever it is, and being, I didn't know that was the intent. It's like, I didn't know that was the intent. It's like, So that's just where communication is so vital, and constantly finding better ways to hold our consultants and subcontractors and designers accountable so that they can hold us accountable and that can move the project forward just effectively.
Awesome. So, we mentioned pro forma earlier, we mentioned communication, and now I'd like to dig into how to reduce. I know it's not possible to effectively eliminate, but reduce potential risks to the pro forma and
right.
RFIs, that kind of thing. How do you analyze the project prior to getting into it and kind of get your mind around the potential pitfalls?
Yeah. Mentioning earlier, just the process in which a development goes through with those kind of the risk and feasibility stages that you kind of go through, and through that, like inception, and then the refinement, and then ultimately the feasibility, and then making it happen. I think one of the biggest ways to do that is, one, sticking to that process and not letting yourself deviate. Easier said than done. You still have so many critical areas and expertise that you're trying to cover during this timeline and process. And so what, like you mentioned, our objective is to get out in front of those and to encourage our consultants to help us and inform us in the areas that we may have blind spots to. That's where it goes back to knowing your weaknesses, knowing your blind spots as a company. Here at Cornerstone, I would say maybe our backgrounds are maybe more in design and architecture. We have financial background and construction background. So maybe we obviously have to rely more on legal when legal comes into approach, or when engineering comes into place. We have to rely on those people to kind of get out in the forefront and get ahead of us in those areas. With the potential risks, I think if you understand the overall process, and as a specific example is kind of before you get to that second phase of feasibility, just from we haven't really talked about the public component, but the public component is such a vital part, even as a private for-profit developer, where every single project you're ever going to do is the city and the government. Every single project you're ever going to do is the city and the government is your partner in it. And one of those things is understanding so many of the times that we're going through a project that's financially feasible, it makes sense contextually for the environment. One of our biggest hurdles in this necessary process is that government entity, and understanding the roles that your site will have with neighbors, with councilmen and women, and the processes that take place at the government level, minimizing those risks by. We pride ourselves in being Fort Worth based. We do projects throughout DFW and Texas, but having great relationships within Fort Worth helps us overcome some of those risks that are just in place when developing, and we can speak with landowners, adjacencies and communities and shareholders in the community, a good relationship to make these developments happen and work hand in hand with the neighborhood. So I don't know if that's a roundabout way of, you're always going to have risk in a development, but the more you can get out ahead of them and rely on people that can identify your blind spots, those are the best consultants and groups that we use, are people that bring attention to, it's an moment for us when we haven't seen it, but we like to get the bad news sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
So
It's a little cheaper.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a great point about the community is always impacted by a development.
Yeah.
In one shape, form. And that's another part that you just can't predict is people. You can try to mitigate the potential for opponents by attacking that early and discuss projects with shareholders such as the city and adjacent property owners. I believe that's something you can't prepare for, but you can definitely try to mitigate the potential for opponents by being upfront, being honest, and providing information. Being honest and providing information to all these people, because more often than not, surrounding property owners just need that additional information and don't necessarily want to be out of the loop.
Yeah, and I think that also gets back to our responsibility as a developer. We talked about vision at the beginning and hiring the right team who knows your weaknesses, but that vision doesn't go to just your team internally, but also it's cast out to those people in the community, and you have to effectively communicate your vision to them in order for a mutual, hopefully a agreement, because we've had instances where it makes sense on, the back and napkin approach passes, the feasibility passes, the design is great, everything is in line, and then we kind of move to that next step, maybe too late in the process, and the neighborhood isn't on board. And so either it's been a really tough conversation and we have kind of, enacted our vision and they've sometimes been on board, but then other times they haven't. That is a tough lesson to learn. But then also it's just a natural part of the development process. You want to be cognizant and empathetic perspectives of your surrounding community, because ultimately that's what improving and enhancing the society around you is our goal.
Right. You're not in the business of creating developments cause lower property values. That's not the goal. It's to improve the community as a whole. When you property values, that's not the goal. It's to improve the community as a whole. When you get into these projects, do you have a certain routine for creating schedules or organizing the project to maximize the potential for success?
Yeah, schedule here, so many timelines financially, legally are dependent on, there's a date from which the title is due, and legally when we acquire the property, this is due, and there's all these implications that are driven tight schedules, and from when our loan closes, when our construction period interest ends, all these are not just arbitrary timelines. They have specific cause and effect on the financial viability of a project. So that's really, it's probably the second place we start at on a project is the timeline and schedule. Probably before that, a rough design, or I guess a concept that's backed up with a simple pro forma, and then really a timeline, and how we can, by timeline, it's sometimes maybe even as simple as like saying city approvals, or even before that, the viability, the design, city approvals, construction, throw in marketing and other necessities. And then as far as getting that broad schedule at the forefront, you kind of give yourself internal deadlines. And then as far as getting that broad schedule at the forefront, you kind of give yourself internal deadlines that you can communicate when you engage all the necessary parties and say, by the end of this date, this is when we need X, Y, and Z. And it just gives you patience once you've communicated vision, but then also the expectation for everyone to be successful. Because one of the biggest lessons I've learned with being able to be a part of the construction process here at Cornerstone is in the project management of our subcontractors, just ultimately communicating the schedule is so critical because it gives everyone that goal in mind. Usually there's no problem indicating the scope of work, but then by which the speed and process that they have to work to achieve that drop dead date.
Yeah, that's extremely important. Discussing those expectations up front. A lot of times, either there could be too busy. I mean, there's internal schedules that everyone keeps, and making sure that schedule is understood is extremely important for all parties.
Yeah. And there's opportunities as the project moves forward and becomes more and more detailed, just like any set of drawings or any financial model. It becomes more and more detailed. And I think we've all seen a 18-month construction project. There's line items. There's 1,200 line items for project. There's line items. There's 1,200 line items for schedules and processes and dates that each subcontractor has to hit. So the more detailed and larger the project is, the more we drill down into those significant dates and extrapolate each line approach that helps you achieve your vision.
I appreciate your time, but I have one more question for you, Cameron. What is a habit of yours that you believe brings you success in development?
Oh man,
I
habit of
blindsided you a
mine.
little bit.
No, you're good. I appreciate that. I think that actually a part of what I'm going to say is, enjoying, finding enjoyment and I guess ultimately success in being put in uncomfortable situations. I think a lot of times we fall back into our own comforts and our own ways of doing things in the past. And what I love about development is the opportunity to be put in uncomfortable situations, like we talked about earlier. There's so many tentacles that a developer has, and where and how they impact a development is so broad. And there's going to be times, and until I have, let's say, 100,
Or some gray hairs. Maybe.
yeah, or some more gray hairs, exactly. I'm going to I'll be better with each project. And with each project, there's going to be turns and twists and turns where you're going to be uncomfortable, but it's ultimately how you learn and how you achieve that. So I guess to answer your question, my habit that I've tried to form is really just poise and understanding that there's going to be uncomfortable moments with each project, but how we respond and how we can, I would say, ask the right questions and take that in stride is
essentially a habit of learning for every twist and turn that happens. And like you said, it happens quite often for you guys.
Oh yeah.
Probably almost a daily occurrence.
Oh yeah. And I think, also having the habit of humility to say, you know what, I've never experienced that before, but I'm going to say, you know what, I've never experienced that before, but I'm going to find that out, or I'm going to research that and get back to you. So you're never always going to have the right answers. Even if you do have 100 projects under your belt, you're always going to be learning. So get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Thanks, Cameron, for your time. I'm going to let you get back to it, get those 100 projects under your belt.
Yeah, there you go.
Thanks again.
All right. Thanks, Matt.